For the last 2 years, clearly Welsh rugby has fallen off a cliff. And people have said this can't go on. Wales can't keep losing from an on-field situation because success breeds success, doesn't it? But you also can't keep losing and not changing things, because all of a sudden what's going to be hit is your ticket sales, your merchandise, your sponsorship deals, all these things which are going to go from where they were in the Grand Slam years to where they are now. As I sit here in front of you today, I don't think I've been as happy as a person for a long time. If I'd have finished rugby and not planned anything, we'd probably be having a very different conversation. The last 12 months, I put myself out there in terms of I found out what I liked and what I didn't like. I found out what I was good at as well, because I said to my wife and I said to everyone, I'm not doing something for the next 20, 25 years, which I hate every day. You look at someone like Pollock. Sometimes you can think, whatever, but he's putting himself out there. Kids want to be him. He's dyed his hair peroxide blonde. People are thinking, what's his next celebration? And I just think that's so important. You can't have everyone like that, but rugby hasn't got everyone like that, so that's fine. If you've got a handful or a smaller minority of people like that, I think it's brilliant for the sport.
Dan, thank you so much for coming. Welcome to the Business of Sport.
Thank you for having me. It feels a bit strange being on this side of the mic now, not asking the questions and actually being able to give a few answers for a bit.
Well, you're doing so many, aren't you, these days? It's high demand.
Well, no, I was quite happy that I got the jersey. The jersey was the main thing. I just said when I walked in and I saw it on the table, you saved yourself, because if it wasn't there, I'd have been walking out the door straight away. So
it is the reason, as we said, people come.
I'm happy that I've ticked off the jersey, and I mean, when you asked, it was an absolute no-brainer. Like we've known each other. Well, how long have we known each other for now?
A year, right?
Yeah, a year or so. So like when you sort of messaged and said you fancy coming on, it was like, absolutely.
Oh, that is great. Firstly, join the pantheon of Welsh sporting legends that we've had on this show, which, obviously including Sam, Ben Davis.
Yeah, Ben as well.
Captain,
yeah,
brilliant, great guy. We've had. We did a show with David Buttress.
The Dragons. Yeah.
So we've had a few.
Yeah, so a bit of a Spurs link there as well, isn't there? With Sam and obviously Ben.
I didn't know that obviously about Sam until I read his book before I did the show. I read his book, and when he just started talking about, he was just saying, "I named my dog Ledley."
Ledley after Ledley King.
It's like, I'm surprised the dog can walk, because
I was going to say he's at Spurs. He was at Spurs in. Where was he? He was at Spurs in midweek, I think he was, or something. So he's, he's a big Spurs fan. So I'm a United fan. So,
and Swansea,
who you had the guys on last week.
Yep. So I can't forget those guys.
Although I haven't quite seen Snoop and Luka Modric walking around Swansea High Street just yet. No. But there's still time.
You hope so?
I hope so, yeah.
I think they get a shock.
There was a rumour going around Swansea that Luka Modric, remember Leon Britton, who used to play for the Swans? He's got quite a big house up in the country by the training ground. And there was a big rumour. I think it was just Chinese whispers, but it was basically, Luka Modric has bought Leon Britton's house, sort of thing. So they basically just picked the biggest house next to the training ground and said, Luka Modric is buying it, and people were like believing it and running away with it. But unconfirmed, no sightings of the two of them just yet.
No, it's great to see though. Money coming into the area, great attention coming in. Those clubs, with the sporting assets, and it comes into something that was the hottest thing people wanted to know about straight off. But bringing that money into Welsh sports, and particularly the clubs, is great. And it does feed into the first point of why this is actually a great time as well. Not because you're retired now and you're on the second period of your career, which is awesome. And of course, we'll talk about that. But the state of Welsh rugby is such a discussion point at the moment. And particularly with the news the other day, the kind of One Wales piece, and the clubs that links into the one that you are obviously so storied in with Ospreys, it's kind of left people, a lot of people I speak to, quite confused as well about what's happening.
Well, that's ultimately the biggest thing. I think, when was it, last week or the week before, a couple of weeks ago, when the announcement broke, that was supposed to be a day of clarity, and it probably threw up more questions than answers. And I'm a little bit torn between it, if I'm honest, Charles, because for the last 2 years, clearly Welsh rugby has fallen off a cliff. And people have said this can't go on. We need change. We need someone from outside the goldfish bowl almost in terms of Welsh rugby, someone who hasn't got the history, the emotional, invested emotionally in the I suppose, the history of it, really, to sort of come in and make some big radical changes. So you bring someone like Dave Redding, who I feel a little bit sorry for, to be honest. I think because everywhere Dave has been, he's had serious. You look at England in '03 in terms of the World Cup, he was part of that squad, the FA, the Olympics. So everywhere he's gone, he's kind of had big success and made some changes and implemented some plans. So you bring someone like him in, and maybe the two, I think their optimal solution was sort of the two clubs in terms of, one in the east, one in the west. And you sort of think, right, well, maybe that is a bit radical, and the training centre together and things like that. But that's what people were asking for. You can either do nothing and things just carry on, the regions failing, the Welsh national team failing, and that's not anything new. Like when we were successful, it wasn't like the regions were top every, you know what I mean? Like when we were winning Grand Slams and championships and semi-finals of World Cups, it wasn't like the regions were nailing it every year. So, okay, fair enough. You think, right, there's some pushback on that. And you kind of think, you accept that, going from 4 to 2 is quite a big jump. So they eventually land on 3. And I think that's where we'll get into. The messaging wasn't great from the union in terms of, it just didn't sit right in terms of it. There was no clarity behind it. It was like, okay, well, there's 3, but there's one going to be in the east, there's one going to be based in Cardiff, and then there's one in the west, but they can all apply for the licenses, and potentially, in theory, you could have Clethley playing in, or Swansea playing in Cardiff, which doesn't make any sense and things. So, but you've sort of gone from sort of 2 as being, okay, everyone's rubbished that and said no, and now you've gone to 3, everyone's still not happy, and things like, okay, well, we can't go to 3, we need to stay at 4, and things like that. I said, well, what was the point of bringing somebody in? What was the point of all the people saying, well, we need change, we can't carry on like this? And I think the problem is that everybody wants change, but they don't want to be the ones that change, and it has a knock-on effect. And ultimately, it's probably, I saw something that Sam Warburton said actually the other day, and he sort of said he doesn't think that 25% of the players in Wales are probably good enough to be professional standard. And I don't think that's unfair. I think that's probably not far off the mark. But ultimately as well, especially talking about where we are here today, it's kind of like Wales can't keep losing from an on-field situation because, success breeds success, doesn't it? But you also can't keep losing and not changing things, because all of a sudden what's going to be hit is your ticket sales, your merchandise, your sponsorship deals, all these things which are going to go from where they were in the Grand Slam years to where they are now. So I think it's a really complicated system.
But we're talking about Grand Slam years, and now we're in a situation where, for anyone that isn't a Wales fan, it's a stick, and there's laughing about it, and oh my God, you won a game, congratulations, and how many losses, and is it a really idiotic question to ask, whether this situation that's happening behind the scenes has coincided, with the clubs and the national team performing at the level that it is, because it just seems like it's all happened at the same time. You
would think so, wouldn't you?
Yeah.
But it's funny when we won. Let's just take 2019. We won the Grand Slam in 2019. We played Scotland on the Saturday, and on Tuesday afternoon we were having a discussion in the team room at the Vale Hotel where we're based about a potential merger between the two teams from the West in terms of the Ospreys and the Scarlets. A couple of years later, the talk of the players' strike in terms of just before the World Cup, and then all of a sudden we go and nail our group in the World Cup, and probably should have done a bit better and got to a semi-final, but ended up losing to Argentina. So there's always a soap opera. It's like Welsh rugby is a soap opera in terms of there's always something. So I don't agree with the sense of like Welsh rugby has to be perfect off the field and perfect at regional level, perfect at grassroots level to sort of mean that the national team succeeds. But you know what it's like as well, John, when the national team and when the top performs, and you're going back to, you are getting good sponsorship deals, you are getting good prize money, you are getting good ticket sales, things tend to get papered over, don't they, in terms of, and I think that's probably where things have happened. You look at the generation of players we had and now haven't got, it's probably the succession planning probably hasn't, there wasn't enough emphasis on that And they probably thought that was just going to continue and continue and continue without maybe putting a lot of work into it.
But it's quite a different ownership structure, funding structure, isn't it, in this situation for the people that don't understand or aren't necessarily aware of it? Because unlike a lot of leagues, whether it's rugby or other sports, clubs generally are privatised. Yeah. They're owned by an individual or a group, and they're the ones that are in charge of financing it. A league or a union won't play a role in financing it outside of doing central deals across media, which are indirect. But in Wales, the WRU actually does provide financing for each of the clubs, right? So I guess why is that structure? Why has that been in place in the first place?
Mainly because the regions probably can't afford. But previously, they did have. You used to have a lot of guys in terms of you always a benefactor, for want of a better word, in terms of who were writing checks at the end of each month, by in terms of some occasions to clear, or the end of the season to clear the debt, etc., etc. And the union sort of thought, well, that's not sustainable. And also you look at what's happened with the Wasps and Worcester and London Irish in the English PREM. But ultimately, the union funds the regions because they want Team Wales to be successful. And you look at what England are doing a little bit now in terms of their central contracts and things like that. They're funding more and more into the clubs so that the clubs don't have to take 100% of the wages on board when they're away for all of November, all of Six Nations, miss the start of the season if they go on Lions or Summer Tour and World Cups, etc. So I suppose that's the general gist of it, is that they're trying to help subsidise the regions, and so the regions can run their. It's a budget. That's what they're giving the regions. Now, how they manage that budget is up for discussion, and have they wasted it over the years, and where are they spending it, etc., etc., is a big thing. Now, one thing that was it was all a bit doom and gloom in the announcement the other day, and I agree that there was lots of questions which needed to be answered and probably wasn't delivered in the right way. But I do think that one thing that, in terms of centralising the national academies, was something that was lost, and something that why we're probably in this mess at the minute is because we haven't produced enough good players to come in and replace the players who've been on 50, 60, 70, 80, 90, 100 caps.
So life is busy for all of us. I get it, you get it. Time is tough to come by, especially to get a meal that helps you towards your goals. Fortunately, Huel gets it too. You've probably seen or heard of them around, but they actually go beyond a quick protein boost after a workout. There's so much more. Their Black Edition powder is a complete meal, so you feel full, focused, and ready for your day. Less than £2 per meal, it's packed with 40 grams of plant-based protein and 26 essential vitamins and minerals. There's no added sugar, it's gluten-free, and it tastes great, with flavours like salted caramel and chocolate. Plus, it keeps me full for hours. It's perfect for breakfast, lunch, or post-workout. And our friends at Huel haven't stopped there. They've been listening to their fans and just released their newest product. Known for meal replacements, introducing their brand new Huel Light, ready to drink. It's a lighter, complete meal in a bottle at just 190 calories. It's packed with 25 grams of protein, 6 grams of fibre, and vitamins and minerals. Perfect for breakfast on the go or as a healthy pick-me-up anytime. I've been a big fan of Huel for years, and this is right up there with my favourite products. If you're into fitness, it still packs those core ingredients to give you the best recovery possible, but without the heaviness of a full shake. Or it could be your perfect solution for the working professional, the busy parent, looking for that quick nutrition boost. You can make the mindful health decision without being too extreme. Huel has already sold over 500 million meals around the world, and now it's your turn to try it too. New customers can get 30% off with my exclusive code BOS at huel.com. The link is in the description below. Please check the description for terms and conditions. Unlock a lighter, easier way to fuel your day with Huel Light so you can focus on what really matters. In your team that you had, I mean, you're over 100 caps. You had quite a few players.
Quite a few of us in that era.
Over 100 caps, right? And that's amazing while you're playing it. And while that's been fantastic for the current, it also can be problematic for the next generation because it doesn't afford that development opportunity for some of them coming through. You guys had such a strong group of players for so long, and you were playing at the top level for so long that has had now a negative impact on players coming through.
I think there's two ways to look at this. And the first way to look at it is, it must have been something that was going right at that time because of the investment in the academies, the investment in the age grades, et cetera, because you look at the players that came through in terms of like an under-20s, under-21s team that was back there, myself, Sam Warburton, Justin Tipperick, Jamie Roberts, John Davis, Rhys Webb, Lee Halfpenny. So you're thinking, well, to produce as many players who've gone on to have 50, 100 caps, Lions, World Cups, etc., that can't be just luck. Or the other theory is, was it just luck that we had a really good crop of players who came together at the right time? But I will say back then it was kind of like the academy setup was properly professional in terms of they invested in coaches going out to school. So any sort of school break or lunchtime, I'd be sitting around a laptop with one of the development coaches or going and doing some passing drills and things like that. Now that isn't the case, is the bottom line. And ultimately, you come back down to everything that sport and business of sport, and it all comes down to effectively, have you got the finances to provide support for the team to succeed and for the team to thrive? And probably at the minute, or certainly for the last however long, Welsh Rugby probably hasn't. And I do think that's why that was a little bit of good news which got lost in the announcement and the headlines of the announcement. But yeah, I suppose I don't know the answer to that question. Did we just have a good group of players, or was the system in place at that point? Did that allow us to have the players that came through almost a little bit like the class of 92 in a sense, doesn't it? In terms of, if you want to look at it from a football analogy, it was kind of like, your Giggs, your Beckhams, your Nevilles, etc. They all came through at the same time, but then the systems were in place for those players to succeed and go on and achieve, rather than, I suppose, set up to fail in a sense.
I mean, looking at it now, then you know Steve Tandy, the new coach, was very well. He was your coach at Ospreys, correct? Played
with him as well, so I'm sure at my age as well now. Yeah,
that's why. This is when it starts getting frightening.
Played with him, got coached by him, and now sort of sitting down chatting to him. Yeah.
What's he going to be able to bring to that setup to hopefully change those fortunes?
A huge amount of positivity, and I know that sounds strange when you're coming off the 2 years that Welsh Rugby's just had. But what he is a brilliant human being. And I know that sometimes that sounds like, okay, well, I'd much rather have a better rugby coach or a brilliant rugby coach. And to a degree, there's an argument. But I think the demographic of that group now, it probably needs a Steve Tandy type figure rather than, let's just go and Eddie Jones, a Warren Gatland, a Razzie Erasmus, those super coaches. I think what he is, he's true to himself. He brings a great amount of positivity. He's clear, he's concise. And I said this to Steve, and Steve won't mind me saying this. When he was at the Ospreys to start with, he was a young coach. And he probably, and when you're a young coach or an inexperienced coach, you think the answer is do more. So we'd end up coming in on Sundays, and no one wants to be in on a Sunday. I don't care who you are, what your profession is, any aspect of life. Nobody wants to come into work on a Sunday afternoon or Sunday morning, afternoon, whatever. And we'd be dragged in on Sunday to train. We'd be there long days. Steve didn't treat himself well in terms of he'd be away from his family the whole day. He'd almost be sleeping in his office type of thing. And it took him a little bit of time to go away he went away to the Waratahs in Australia, then went to Scotland, the Lions. And I worked with him at the Lions a couple of years, 4 years ago, and he looked a different person. Physically just looked different in terms of healthier. And everyone who's been there says how much of a positive influence he is around the group and how much he puts his stamp on things. And I think that's the big thing for what Steve can do in around the negativity of the off-field stuff in Welsh Rugby. He's been really open and said, because the easiest thing for Steve to do is say, okay, just park that and we'll concentrate on the rugby. Yeah. But what he's done, he said, look, whatever needs discussing, let's not hide the elephant in the room. let's talk about it. Anything which we can help and support you with, then let's do it. And I think that's gone down well with the players from a human level, rather than just being, okay, you boys have got a job to do, forget about your livelihoods and potentially what's going to come, and just make sure that you're ready to go as soon as you cross the whitewash for training.
Is it horses for courses? What I mean by that, this group of players needs a coach like that. You guys, when you were playing, and you've just spoken about it, at the height of your powers, right? You needed the super coach in a Warren Gatland because 100%. You had those.
Yeah, and that's exactly what it is. You need to find, I think, the connection between sort of like a let's just say a Warren Gatland, because he was in charge before Steve. Probably that got lost a little bit between the demographic of the players, but from the demographic of players we had in those amazing years, we needed a coach who was hard on us. We needed a coach who probably didn't put an arm around us a huge amount, who demanded ridiculous standards of us. And you team that up with sort of Sean Edwards, Neil Jenkins, Rob Howley, and you do well to get a compliment in 10 years type of thing. even when we were successful, it'd still be sort of work-ons type of thing. But I think that's understanding your people.
Yeah.
And I saw something that Sir Alex Ferguson said a while ago. He said, like, if you don't understand your people, how do you expect to motivate them? And I thought that's like struck quite a chord for me, because I was like, well, what the group we had needed was tough love, was not really getting too many compliments, trained into the ground, routine in terms of, like, we knew what the schedule was. There was no need for a schedule to come out. And I mean that in a positive way, because it was like, right, Monday was this, Tuesday was this, Thursday and Friday was this. Whereas this new group probably needs like you said, horses for courses, they probably need a guy to come in and change things up a little bit, invest a bit more time in them, if that makes sense, as individuals. We were characters and we'd been around a long time there. We didn't need people investing a huge amount of time in us as people, if that makes sense. Yeah. We needed coaches working us hard, training us to win rugby matches.
When did you get your biggest compliment?
I had a few, I'd say not so complimentary things. I remember Sean Edwards, and we were at 2015. So this is about 6 years into my career now with Sean, and it was my first day back in for World Cup training camp. So I think I had a week longer than anyone else, and we were doing like a passing challenge through the tyre. Like they put like a tyre in hanging from the crossbar, and you had to sort of pass it through and things like that. And the boys had been doing it for a couple of weeks beforehand. And I came back and I said, right, whoever wins this challenge buys everyone dinner, or the group who won got dinner bought for them, sorry. And Sean Edwards sort of said, oh, that's it, boys. Now Biggsy's back. The competitive edge is back and things like that. That's what we like in this team. And I turned around to him. I thought, something quite positive coming out there, sort of thing. So,
and you remember that.
And I remember that, yeah, because you have to work incredibly hard to get a compliment from Warren Gatland, from Sean Edwards. And I always laugh. Another thing, like the flip side of it, is when we played quarterfinal against France in 2019, we didn't play particularly well, but I was sort of there, managed to get the team over the line in the end, and we won. And everyone was sort of happy at the end of the whistle and coming in the change room, good vibe. Just got to a semi-final of the World Cup, and Gats was in the change room. He said, so you weren't at your best today, were you? And I said, well, I can't have been that bad. You didn't take me off. And I thought like, I'm not like, I bit back a little bit. And I was like, well, yeah, I was like, I wasn't that bad. You'd have dragged me off after 50 if I was that bad. But I think that was kind of like his way of like not getting ahead of yourself, always keeping the pressure on you. And we responded well to that. Whereas it, like, life's changed, isn't it? In 10 years, 5 years, even from 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 15 years ago, life has changed, sport has changed. And whereas now it is probably a little bit more, how do you deal with certainly younger players and bring them through? And I think Steve has, from all accounts, has nailed that, changed up the week in terms of schedule. So we always used to train Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday off, Thursday, Friday, game Saturday, whereas now they're doing Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday off, and it just breaks the routine up of the week. The hotel is only for relaxation type of thing, the team room and food and chilling out, and then the National Centre of Excellence is for the meetings, and almost when you open the door and come through the door there, it's like it's work time, you know, like you're separating work from relaxation time. Change obviously how they're going to play, some selection issues, and also change the changing rooms at the Principality Stadium, which I think is a really good move. And people have said to me, oh well, is that going to help Wales win a game of rugby? Well, the answer is probably not. If you look at it in isolation, the answer is no. But it's like, okay, so they've changed the setup of the week. They've changed how they're going to potentially play. They've changed the changing rooms, etc., etc. So it's like, well, you know, you may get 10% more out of that team because of those little bits.
It's a small 1%, it's the incremental 1%.
100%. And I looked at it and I spoke to Steve when he said, Steve actually mentioned that. He said, what do you think about that? And I said, I think it's a brilliant idea, because there will be boys in that squad who've potentially played 10, 11 games at the Principality Stadium, and they've gone into the up the stairs in the tunnel, turned left to go into the home changing room, and all they've associated with that home changing room is defeat. Now all of a sudden you turn right, you go into a new environment, new changing room, new setup, and you sort of, all of a sudden it's like, okay, well, this is new. And it may, again, like Steve knows this as well. Steve knows that results and performances will dictate the narrative around Steve's time and whether pressure comes on him or people say he's the best thing since sliced bread. But he couldn't have done any more before a ball is kicked in his tenure to make a better environment and a better first impression in front of a squad and a nation who desperately needs probably somebody like him. And I know it's gone a little bit unnoticed, but he's I think it's like nearly 20 years since there's been a Welsh head coach. And that was always the thing for the England football manager, wasn't it? In terms of, like, you know, you had your Capellos, your Ericssons and all these, and it was like basically everyone wanted an English manager, didn't they?
Everyone wanted Southgate. Whether it was Southgate or not, they wanted
a Southgate. Yeah. But, like, you know, you got Capello, and I think that's important. And again, that's important where Wales are currently. And Steve made it. Also, what I've been impressed with Steve, he's got 3 young girls, and then they were happy up in North Berwick. They'd sort of found a house, lovely part of the world where they live in, out in the sticks a little bit. And the easy option for Steve would have been, well, keep the family there, keep everyone happy up there. North
Berwick is in Scotland.
As in Scotland, yeah.
So he's basically always on a golf course.
Yeah, but well, I don't know. I'm not sure. Yeah, I was going to say, I'm not sure Steve is. I'm not sure. I mean, we should play with Steve. We could probably take a few quid off him, actually. I wouldn't imagine he's that good a golfer.
Amazing.
But for me, it was like, okay, well, the easy option is stay there. Whereas he said to his wife, and he said, no, like, I have to, and especially where Wales are at the minute, I have to be visible, I have to be seen, I have to be present in and out of the clubs, in the office every day, whatever it is. And this is not a dig at someone like a Warren Gatland, because that worked for us as a group, that worked for him as an individual, coming in and out of campaigns and things like that. Yeah. But I just think that, again, the easy option for Steve would have been keep everybody happy from a family side of it, but he's made the decision. He's all in on this.
Were there cultural clashes with someone like a Warren, with you guys, based on how certain situations were approached?
I wouldn't say there were any cultural clashes. I think you had to understand Warren. You had to know that he would approach things very differently. It was a little bit like, one day you could get Warren and he'd be like, absolutely, yeah, no problem, brilliant. Other days it would be like, go and tell the rest of the boys we're not having half a day, or we're doing a double day, or we're training 3 days, whatever it is. Basically, get back in your box and go back and train. I'm the boss here, type of thing. And like, again, I quite liked that, because you sort of never really knew where you were, in a sense, and he always kept you on your toes a little bit. He always kept you on your toes, and so I don't think there was definitely no cultural differences. He was I mean, I think the New Zealand mindset is very much a winner's mentality, whereas he made a huge difference to Wales as a rugby playing nation, but as a mentality. We didn't beat the All Blacks when we played in that period. I mean, I don't think there's any real shame in that. They were
coincided with them being
half decent. Yeah, they were half decent. But every single game under Warren Gatland we went into, we believed we could win. Now, we didn't win. Clearly, we didn't win every game. But there was not a game we went into thinking we were little Wales and we couldn't win. And I think that was almost the biggest thing that Warren did from a cultural side. He brought a winning mentality, or a New Zealand mentality maybe, in the fact of he never wanted to be an underdog going in.
As a fan, I remember that no time better, and I still find it slightly triggering sitting opposite you having this conversation, because one of the worst results, as a big sports fan, that I've ever taken in any sport was 2015 Rugby World Cup. Do you know what? I actually watched it again before this just to trigger myself again.
Where did you? Were you at the stadium or at home?
No,
or?
I was at university with my mates. We were, that World Cup was amazing, obviously, because it was in England, and so. And I was at Exeter, and we had a few games down in Exeter. So, we'd been to a couple of the games. We actually went up to the Principality to watch Australia-Fiji for one of them. So, you felt so into it. And it was great. But we had that group of death, England, Wales, Australia. And, just on that point, and the reason I say I find it triggering sitting opposite you is because, as I was reminded, England lost 28-25. You scored 23 of the points. Including a last few minutes from halfway line. My God, I remember we had a Welsh fan in the house watching with us who got up and celebrated so much. I kicked him out of the house. I didn't speak to him. I genuinely didn't speak to him for a couple of months afterwards. But long way to get around to the point I'm making, which was, I remember looking at that group and genuinely being like, oh, this isn't England and Australia and maybe Wales creep in.
Yeah.
It was three big teams up there,
and that's what I go back to, Charles, in terms of he made us believe, and that was you can say what you want about Warren as a coach, technical whatever you want to say, right? People will agree, disagree with how the game is played and how you should play, etc. But what he did, he just brought that belief into the group, and it was weird. That summer he came into his own a little bit, because really subtly again, we'd be in the gym because the whole sort of the narrative was, it's the group of death, and England's home World Cup, and England will start as massive favourites in that game against Wales, and it's everyone says, they try and shut yourself away from it, but it's impossible. It creeps into the camp, and you read a paper or social media or whatever it is. And he was so clever. It was like every opportunity he had. So we'd be in the gym, and there'd be a whiteboard in the gym, and he'd just walk in through the whole gym so everyone could see he was there, walked over to the whiteboard and just wrote on the board, "We will beat England on the 28th of September," or whatever it was. Sort of would leave notes on the dinner tables. "We will qualify from this group." And it's a little bit like, if you say something enough, or if the top guy or the head honcho is sort of showing that much belief, again, like we just spoke about with the 1%ers, it could have been, but that game was very much 1% margins.
It's an amazing game, wasn't it? I mean, watching it back, it's just
when
insane.
I look back, like when you're in it, you maybe don't appreciate it, and you don't realize how, like, when you watch games now, you can see like that game was amazing. Like, let's just say like France South Africa quarterfinal of the World Cup a couple of years ago, like that was an amazing game. But then you think of that had its, it was so full of drama, and again that was kind of like a bit of a seismic moment for me, really, as an individual, because that probably at a World Cup as well, it probably like announced me from being a Welsh player to a national player. Then, do you know what I mean?
International,
global. Let's call it. From a World Cup side of it.
Don't be modest. You can't say it.
It was. Well, I'll let you say. I tee it up for you to say. But it was great. It was. Some good time. We had some brilliant times, and that's why for me it's been so difficult. Like watching the last couple of years, in terms of where Wales were to where Wales probably where they are.
So tell me, when something like that happens, sport is often defined by those moments, and the celebrity of athletes or the success of athletes can often come down to one thing that completely shifts their persona, perspective, fortunes. When that happens for you, you come out of that World Cup. How did it change your life?
It's funny because all of a sudden I had like French teams on the phone to my agent, and I had to decide, do I want to stay? And I'd never, in my previous contracts, it wasn't even an option. There was no interest particularly, but B, there was also like, I didn't want to go, you know what I mean? So it kind of like, even if there was interest, you probably would have squashed it quite early. But all of a sudden then it was like, my dad phoned me the day afterwards, because we played Fiji like 4 days later, so we hardly had any time to recover and enjoy it. But he phoned me later saying, "Oh, there's a reporter coming down to the house to do an interview." I was like, "What?" He said, "Oh yeah, there's a reporter coming down." I said, "Well, phone him back and tell him no," sort of thing. I was like, it was a group stage of the World Cup. We still had to sort of get over the line and qualify from the group, and then sort of my mum said the same in terms of people have been getting in touch, want to do an interview, want to have a quote, and they went to my school, which I went to, Gatland School, and interviewed the head of PE, and for me, that initially was kind of like, well, that was strange. That's something that you only see happen, or I felt like that you only see that happen to other people.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? It's almost like people rock up at, talking about a completely different stratosphere, but like say a Gareth Bale school, or where Ronaldo went to, you know what I mean? I'm never in a million years compare myself to those guys, but it was kind of something that you sort of watch, you know what I mean? You can only watch that from other people. So that kind of felt a bit of a change, and then all of a sudden you get a bit more interest from abroad. And I remember, because I was in the middle of renegotiating my deal with the union, and I was outside the hotel on the phone to my agent, and I still remember this call to the day, that Warren, you know when you're like, it's like when you're outside the office or whatever, when you're trying to have a private call, and you sort of, when people walk past, you sort of turn the other way, or your head, whatever, you give it away straight away. Yeah. And so Warren must, obviously a wily old cat, must have realised that, and he walked past, because I was on the phone to Tim Lopez, my agent, and he was saying, there's a couple of good offers coming in from France and things like that. And he walked past and he said, just so you know, walk into the hotel, back out, and said, just so you know, that contract that we agreed, that's ready to be signed now on Monday. And I was just like on the phone, like I was like, okay. And I was just like, he like clearly knew that was kind of like, and he'd been around obviously, players and things that had gone like that. And so I suppose it was quite a big jump in that way. And I enjoyed the immediate math of it afterwards. Where I struggled after it was probably about 3 or 4 months later, when it was you were no longer average player or the going under the radar player. Everyone expected you to play at that level every time you stepped on the field. And that actually for me was quite difficult when I almost had a break or gave it a bit of time to come back to it. And then it was like, right, well, the pressure's on you to perform, and you're almost other people's property then, in a sense, you know what I mean? And everyone just thinks, that's the level you'll be at forever, type of thing.
And was that coinciding with broader public attention, where you're having to think about yourself outside of rugby, the pressures of being exposed to public, to broader media, where previously you could have just, as you said, felt like, and as Sam often says, he felt like he was just in his little Welsh village and never felt like he was a celebrity outside of it.
I think there's a definite element of that. And admittedly as well, Charles, I never want, and I mean this in the most respectful way possible, I never wanted to just be, how do I phrase this? I never wanted to just be like known in Wales, or wanted to just be happy sort of living in Wales my whole life and things like this. I wanted to broaden my horizons. I wanted to be being able to do things in London, to be doing things in Paris or, Dublin, whatever it is, type of thing. And so I suppose from that side of it, there's an element of, it was nice while I had that, while it was quiet and it was known. But then there also was an element of thinking, well, I wanted more for myself. And where do you get more for yourself? Probably in bigger cities with more opportunities, more financial opportunities, et cetera, et cetera.
And you've got to make hay while the sun shines, right?
Well, that's it. That's it. And I think I re-signed that contract in the end, because I felt like it was my time in the limelight. And if I'd have moved, I may not have been able to carry on playing international rugby. So I decided to stay because I was in a good spot in that space. And I always find I always used to love, and I mean this, like I loved contract negotiations because it was basically a game of poker, isn't it? Effectively.
Yeah. How did it work with you? Was it with the WRU?
So the WRU, yeah. So it was kind of like there was like a limit of what they would want to pay, and then it was like, oh, do they pay the agents' fees? And I got a bit cocky at that point. I thought after the World Cup, I want a car thrown in as well.
That was Tim, wasn't it?
Yeah.
One for Tim as well.
One for Tim, yeah. So I ended up getting it, but then it was like, the benefit in kind. I was going to get done on benefit in kind. So I was like, well, I want that covered in my contract and things. And then, so anyway, we kind of got there in the end. So it was basically sort of back and forth. Gats was actually quite involved with those contract side of things. And I have to say, like, especially like talking about like this side of it, I loved contract negotiations.
And you don't need to give obviously exact numbers, but what kind of size of contracts are we talking about at this time?
So you'd be looking at sort of, well, what I have been there, low 100,000s there in terms of that. In terms of that would have been somewhere where I'd have signed, and in that sort of area, yeah.
Okay, and if we're then going to put the attractive part of an opportunity to go and play in France,
I think you have to be looking towards doubling that if you're going to give up international rugby, if you're going to move abroad, if you're going to do all that side of it. So yeah, I think there's an element of that, and again, I think that's probably a double. You have to double that. Certainly, Warren always said for you to be probably having a conversation about you looking to go outside of Wales, where potentially you don't get looked after in bracket. Because I have to say, in my time in Northampton, I couldn't have been looked after better, and I get onto that because those types of offers that we're just talking about. I think it's really disingenuous for me to sit here and say, right, I always wanted to play for Northampton. The answer is I respected Northampton as a club, didn't know anything about the town or anything like that, right? So the initial offer to get me to be interested in Northampton was a financial offer. And that's generally that's how business, sport, life generally works. Whether you work in Tesco's, an accountant, a rugby player, football player, whatever it is. So like whenever I get asked about this, I always think it's really important to be like straight up about it, because I felt like that was the point which I got, okay, well, that sort of pricked my ears up a little bit and it got you interested. And I always laugh when Tim, again, we sort of chatting and he sort of says, oh, okay, well, Northampton are interested. And I always say, okay, well, it's got to be around this figure to get it done. And like, my phone ran back like 2 minutes later and they were like, yeah, that's fine. And I was like, oh, I should have gone higher. But anyway.
So you think they would have gone, yeah, right.
Maybe, I don't know. I could have maybe squeezed a bit more, but
you got cocky on your contract negotiations.
Yeah. But anyway, sort of signed it. And again, it was kind of like, right, that was the initial offer. Then when you get to the place, when you train, when you get to know the people, when you get to know the town, the supporters, everything, like for me, I honestly fell in love with the place. And it was full of good people. It was a well-run club who never stretched themselves in terms of the salary cap, and always sort of, their loyal supporters in terms of had good season tickets. So they were a well-run club. Really well-run club with good people there, and that reflected. It was a young group when I went in, and I think that was perfect for me because, again, if I'm honest, Charles, I probably thought, right, I've signed a really good financial deal here. Do I go up there and coast in between international campaigns? Could have been, again, the easy option to have done, and I'd be lying if I thought before I arrived through the door that could potentially slip into your mind. But the minute I got in there, I didn't care if I was the highest paid or the lowest paid. It was about working hard. They had a young group of young English players. You guys like your Alex Mitchells, your Rory Hutchinsons, your Fraser Dingwalls, Tommy Freemans, all the guys who were basically Lions and started for England now, 5 years later. And that made a huge impact in me, in driving me every day. Like, I wanted to get better every day. Like, those guys were playing for better contracts, more game time, international honours. And like, I felt like by the end of that, or in amongst that time, I was learning from them as much as they were potentially learning from me. And honestly, I mean that it was not like the initial offer to get me there was financially driven. But as soon as I walked through the door, when you're earning good money, sometimes it's easy just to put your feet up and kick back and relax. And for me, it was the opposite. I felt like because I was earning good money and everyone knew that, I'd signed a decent deal and things. Then all of a sudden it was like, well, you're going to be held on a different pedestal to potentially someone who's, just starting out their career and things. And we did it's called a Blackiston challenge, which is what it's. Freddie Blackiston, a guy from the war in terms of from Northampton, played for the Saints. And it was basically like a 2.5K run, a sandbag challenge sort of thing, and then another 2.5K run to finish. And we did it on like a boiling hot day in Northampton. Surprisingly enough, there was one boiling hot day I had up in Northampton when I signed there. And I thought to myself, before this, I've got to do something here. Not because the perception was any different, but I thought I've got to prove this. The easy option again would be to coast through, just do it at a respectable time. But I thought I'm going to absolutely go for this and prove to people that I'm not here just for a paycheck. And I I went for it, won it. And I think from that day, people realized then it was like, okay, yeah, he's here for working, getting better, improving the team for the supporters, for the town, rather than
to pick up a paycheck.
Just picking up a paycheck.
I'm going to use it as a segue to look at the Premiership, because it's obviously had an interesting last few years, to say the least, with a number of clubs, as we mentioned, coming into trouble. But it's also certainly got a feeling now, and we spoke to Simon on the show, the chief exec of Prem Rugby. Yep. Must get it right now. Sorry, the terminology, Prem Rugby.
Prem Rugby, yeah.
Where it's moving back in the right direction. You've had Red Bull invest in Newcastle, which is obviously a brilliant brand to get involved in it. And you've got some real competitive balance where different teams are capable of winning, and it feels like it's a great product again.
Yeah.
So I'm not even sure where I can find the question in that, other than, well, how do you feel about a whole Prem situation at the moment?
I think the Prem is probably missing a couple of teams, and I think they'd be the first to say, like, you probably, like, a 12-team league is probably like where it, in terms of, you're probably one game short a weekend, especially with, and I mean, like, hopefully the Red Bulls with the investment there will get Newcastle back up. But you look at it at the minute, it's probably got whoever Newcastle are playing currently. You're probably thinking, oh, that's probably the one game where you're thinking, right, well, it's going to be a comfortable win for whoever's playing them in that space. Now, that will change, I'm sure, with the investment and everything. But what I will say is that the Prem and what TNT do with it, they make it an amazing watch and an amazing product. And you've got great rugby grounds, traditional rugby grounds, in terms of probably apart from Bristol, maybe, which have got a big, I'll call it a football stadium at Ashton Gate. But it's not a huge, it's not like it's a 50,000 or whatever. It's great rugby grounds. They've got a good team there. They promote the game brilliantly, and it's just an easy sell. And I think a reflection of how they're strong and how strong they are is that basically everyone wants to kind of get into it. The Anglo-Welsh has been talked about. Wales would absolutely love to put their 2-3 teams into that, which felt like it would be a perfect fit, but. This is something I always think is right to say. Like, it's easy for a player supporter such as me, for argument's sake, to just pass judgment and say, oh, okay, well, why the hell aren't the Union doing this, or why aren't Prem Rugby doing this? Because there's so many sort of obstacles in the way, whether it's contracts of leagues, whether it's agreeing with directors of rugby or shareholders or whatever it is, and it's like, well. And clearly far better than me, that things don't just happen overnight, and things aren't just like, okay, well, one person says it happens and it gets done.
It's the old bureaucracy in sport.
Yeah, exactly. But what I do think is that they've got, and I think the salary cap is great, because you take, like, and I'm a huge football fan, but there is no way that Burnley can win the Premier League. You know what I mean? And I know Leicester won it those years ago, but that, I mean, anybody realistically thinks that that can happen once in a lifetime sort of thing. And that's no disrespect to Burnley. It's just that the budgets that you're operating on, from Burnley to a Arsenal or a City or a Liverpool or I was going to say United then, but let's take it one step at a time.
Don't get carried away, right?
United, we've had a couple of good weeks, so I'm a little bit giddy now at the top there.
Oh God!
But that's what I do think the Prem have done really well in terms of that salary cap. It's made it really competitive, and Bath are by far and away the strongest team at the minute. But you look at sort of the last few years in terms of Bath winning it, Northampton winning it, Saracens winning it, Quins winning it. There's been there's been a bigger dispersion of winners rather than, just one team winning it sort of all the time. And I think the matches are competitive. There's not, like I said, probably apart from the Red Bulls, there's not a huge amount of matches where there's big blowouts in the league.
How competitive would the Welsh teams be if we did manage to find a way to get them in, do you think, at present?
I think currently it would be a bit of a struggle if they're the 4 teams, because you look at the URC, which is a competition that the Welsh teams are in with the South Africans, Italians, Scottish and Irish. And 3 out of the 4 regions are occupying the 3 bottom spaces. So you'd have to say at the minute it's tricky. And again, this goes back to sort of my layman's terms would be like, well, go down to 2 teams and get them in the Prem. Simple, fixed. Everyone's happy. But clearly it's like, okay, how do the teams get cut to 2? Who loses their jobs? Who pays it? How do you get out of the URC contract and things like that? So there's all those things. Yeah. But if you're asking me a question on how competitive they'd be, as it stands currently, I think it would be a bit of a struggle. If you broke it to 2 teams, the quality in those 2 teams, I think they'd be relatively competitive in there. I'm not saying they're going to be probably competing with your Baths and Northamptons and Saracens maybe, but I think they would add value to the league.
I ask it because from my view, and it's a bit of utopia, but I also think if you apply just broader business, if you really want something enough, if all parties want something enough, get it done, particularly when it's regulatory from a governance perspective, just find a way to make it work. But if it's about a protection of product, if it's about quality control, if there are things behind it, like creating the best level of performance across a division, then I understand that that's different and you don't want to compromise.
But also as well, like I think it's a fair argument or something I've seen. It's like, well, why? The argument is like, okay, well, if England, if the Prem want to open up and maybe have a couple more teams, Wales currently have got 4, potentially going down to 3 if they get it done. Well, the argument is like Scotland have got 2 teams. So like all of a sudden it's like, well, why can't Scottish teams come in there? So it's like if the argument is for why can't you have a couple of Welsh teams in, the argument could be the same as like, why can't you get the Scottish team? You know what I mean? It's like, yes, because I'm Welsh, it would be great. I'd love to have Welsh teams in the Prem. And, the proximity in terms of Bristol, Gloucester, Bath is great. But then you could argue from Scottish point of view, Glasgow and Edinburgh, Sale and Newcastle are not probably the same as sort of Cardiff, Bristol type of thing, but not a million miles away. So I just think it's really complicated. And again, that's the thing I found coming into my second career, as you mentioned. In a rugby or a sporting environment, certainly from a team perspective, it generally works that one person decides something and it happens like that. So if you go to Steve Tandy, for argument's sake, in the Welsh squad now, and you say, Steve, players want a day off tomorrow, he either says yes or no, and it happens. You go to, and I found this from working with brands or pitching ideas or investment, whatever it is, it's not, very rarely is it just pick up the phone or speak to one person and they'll say yes or no. It's got to be run by this team and that team and the other team. Then they've got to send an email copying everyone in. Then they've got to come back. And all of a sudden, you're like 4 weeks down the line. And this isn't a criticism. This is just the way it is. Yeah. And that is something I found quite difficult in this part of my career, because I'm so used to, whether it be a contract negotiation, whether it be a question of we want more time off, we want better food, can we do this, can we do that? So often in the last 19 years, it generally has just been speak to one person and he or she will say yes or no.
But the key thing we try and do is, make decisions as quickly as you as you can.
Yeah, no, nobody's saying
and
rush into things and just be, do whatever you want. But
but lean decision-making processes, right? You don't need to swamp it with lots of people. The reason most people do it is because they need validation on their decision, because there's often a concern about what if I make a mistake doing this, and so it's vetted. And particularly in sport, we know the scrutiny is going to lie. If you make a mistake, it's very public in general if it impacts lots of people. So I'm not saying I don't understand it, but it's certain, again, the bureaucry of sport is something that holds it back massively, and it does in rugby. And it comes into now, you're talking about the next phase of your career and, how to adapt, particularly from an athlete's perspective. This is something that's really interesting. It's a transition point of how do you now move into an environment where it is very, very different to the one that you've operated at the highest level in for 20 years.
When you're at the top of your game from the sporting field, you're in a position where you can probably demand a bit more of other people or give people ultimatums a little bit. And that's what I used to love I mean that. I loved contract negotiations because you felt like, because sometimes you were the one not in the ascendancy, but there was other times where I was 100% in the ascendancy, and it's nice to always find when you're playing poker and you're almost bluffing sort of thing, you've got to hold the cards at some point. You can't just bluff and bluff and bluff. You've got to hold the cards at some point, and when you've got the cards, you've then got to sort of go all in on it.
Break it down for me. You had a great, and we should just mention it because you had a great couple of years out in France.
Yep.
You retired recently. You've very sensibly decided to stay out in France for a bit with the family. Tell us about that transition. It's not an easy one.
Not an easy one if you don't prepare. Because as I sit here in front of you today, I don't think I've been as happy as a person for a long time. So, and what I mean by that is if I'd have finished rugby and not planned anything or not done anything or whatever, we'd probably be having a very different conversation in terms of how I felt and where things were and what I was going to do and things like that. And I think that's why a lot of rugby players, for example, I can't comment too much about footballers and other sports, but that's why a lot of people will just stay in rugby and find a coaching role or a role in an organization because, they're almost institutionalized a little bit and you don't really know like what else is out there and what you're good at, what you like, what you don't like. So for me, the last 12 months of my contract or last 12 months of my career, and I think as well, where I was good, I accepted that I wasn't the same player in the last 12 months of my career than 10 years ago, 6 years ago, 4 years ago, whatever time frame you want to put on it. So I said to myself, well, I can either fight it and try and make myself that player again. I had some issues with my back and I physically wasn't the same, but, when you get to, you're not the same player at 35, 36 as you were at 25. And there's so many players in the sporting world who can't accept that. So they're sort of thinking, I have to get back to that level, or I have to keep going and keep going and keep going. And I took a little bit of the foot off the gas from the on-field stuff. Not when I was training. I gave absolutely everything to the last minute. But the last 12 months, I put myself out there in terms of I flew back to London on days off. I took meetings with people who it could have gone absolutely nowhere, or you could be employed by them the next day. I spoke to people. I found out what I liked and what I didn't like, and I made sure I found out what I was good at as well. And what I was not good at, because I said to my wife and I said to everyone, I'm not doing something for the next 20, 25 years, whatever it is, until proper retirement kicks in, which I hate every day. I said, I'm not doing it. So I'm going to find something which I'm A, good at, and B, enjoy, and I'm going to sort of go into that. So I've got lots of, and I've tried to keep it quite diverse as well in terms of the media side of things is generally going to keep 75% of everything sort of works around that, and then all of a sudden you come, the brand work and potentially speaking gigs, and all those bits and pieces come off the back of generally keeping yourself in the limelight and things like that. But I love the media side of it because similar to when I'm playing, I feel like there's so much I can give, and people will say, well, why don't you go into coaching and give that? And the honest answer is that is one option. I've taken the easier option because I don't think for 1 minute the job that the media guys do is 1,000,000% easier than what coaches have to do. But I said, if someone said to me, like, you can coach 8 a.m. till 3 p.m. Monday to Friday, I said, I'd snap your hand off. I'd love to do it. But that isn't what coaches do anymore. And I said, like, that was never anything I did in the last 12 months. I never looked at doing any coaching badges or qualifications or anything. So when you're behind the screen this way, you've got TV angles, you've got slow-mos, since I've retired, I haven't made a mistake. I've been perfect in every single thing. Honestly, I've never made a mistake on a rugby field since I retired. And I've said, I wouldn't have done that. I wouldn't have taken that option as I'm slow-moing it back and things like that. So there's that. But just a real nice bit. I've diversified quite a lot.
It's so important now. Players are brands in themselves, right?
Yeah.
They are often in sport, well, we're seeing more and more, they're as big or sometimes bigger than the badge that they play for. And that can be massively beneficial for those brands. It doesn't always need to be in conflict. You had your big arena, but all jokes around it, and I can see you probably love it, right?
I really love it, yeah. As I'm squirming here, yeah.
God. But like, all jokes aside, even having something like that, then you have people copying it. You have something people associate you with. Maybe you have a brand that jumps on it, like Crouchy with the robot, and suddenly pops up in adverts doing it.
Well, a great example of that at the minute is like, so you look at someone like Henry Pollock, right? And sometimes you can think, whatever, but like, he's putting himself out there. Kids want to be him. Kids now, all of a sudden, like, people want to dye your hair. It's a bit like he's dyed his hair peroxide blonde. People want to be him. He's celebrations. People are thinking, what's his next celebration? And I just think that's so important.
Rugby needs it.
You can't have everyone like that, but rugby hasn't got everyone like that, so that's fine. If you've got, a handful or a smaller minority of people like that, I think it's brilliant for the sport. And like, people, I agree with you, Charlie, in terms of people generally. People buy tickets or season tickets or merchandise or whatever could often have the name on the back, don't they? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Whether it be a Ronaldo, whether it be a Messi, and these guys, yes, they probably, their team preference is Barcelona or Real Madrid or whatever, but you're buying it on the back and things like that. And I just think like, again, not comparing anybody in the rugby world to those guys, but I just think like, how valuable Pollock is to, say, Northampton on the field, because he's a brilliant player, gives them so many options in terms of how they play, etc. But like, he's attracting the new demographic of fans. How many, like, I'd love to know the stat. I don't know the stat, whatever. But how many shirts have they sold with Pollock on the back, or like tape around that? You know what I mean? Like, I just think it's so important that you don't just value a player in what they bring to you on the field. Clearly, that's the most important thing, and that's their first port of call. But you look at someone like, he's a really good example at the minute in terms of how valuable is he to you in terms of ticket sales, season tickets, merchandise, jerseys, etc.
But it's why calendar alignment's such an important thing to figure out. And we talk about this all the time every time we have an executive on here. And I know it's got better in many ways, but I looked last weekend, you had England, Australia at the same time as you had Saints, Quins.
Yeah.
And so Pollock, who a lot of people will be now turning out to, because we have this culture, as you said, where we're buying the back as much of the front as the front. If he's not playing in those games, we're missing some of our biggest stars in the league to lose them to an international game. It's just such a challenge for then some of those clubs to be able to build around that, because you have to have your stars available.
Yeah, what they have done, and the PREM this year, because of probably helped in a sense, not the right word, but the consequence of losing Wasps, London Irish and Worcester has probably allowed them to take more breaks. So the game last week, it was like the PREM Cup game, which is sort of like the second tier competition, but still, still attendance based and everything like that. So there tends to be not a huge amount of games. I think there's one game during the autumn calendar and maybe one during the Six Nations calendar. So that at least then those teams are not competing with, in the Six Nations, England, Ireland, or England, Scotland, or whatever, and England, Australia in the autumn. So I think there's an alignment, more of an alignment from that. But I do think it needs to be that's the next stage for rugby union. Yeah, can it align in terms of whether it's the global season, whether it's in terms of however they do it? But I think that's the next stage of it.
So what do you think when conversations around things like R360 come in?
Well, for me, I don't know. And again, it's just, I always think when you don't know the full ins and outs of things, it's always difficult to comment. But on the face of it, and I think from a player's point of view, absolutely go and cash in, go and get what you want, do whatever you want. Like, players have got different motivations, and if that's what you want and you're going to get paid well to do it, go and do it. There's no issues from my end. The only thing I'd say from the R360 thing is I can't see anybody else winning. Does that make sense? The players are going to get richer, and good luck to them. No problems. By all means, go and take the good contracts and things if that's on the table and whatever. But who else is winning from that? Because the PREM isn't winning because they're taking, then again, with all due respect, they're going to be taking the best players and the most high-profile players. The supporters aren't winning because they, in these times, people can't go to Dubai or Rio or New York or whatever to go and watch their favourite players, and they're out of sight, out of mind. And then all of a sudden, sponsors in the PREM or whatever, URC, whatever, I sort of thinking, well, if we haven't got Sia Khaleesi playing or Finn Russell or Finn Smith or whatever, it's like, well, that's not helping us either. So for me, and again, this is me with a bit of a layman's view, so please, anybody correct me if I'm wrong here, but on the face of it, without knowing the ins and outs and the details, which I think, again, is a problem. Because if they'd have come out, R36, and just said, right, it's X, Y, and Z, and that's how it's working, everyone would be like, okay, well, there's benefits there, disadvantages there. For me, it's like, I've got no doubt they would do an amazing job in terms of the weekends and the stadiums and the cities and the whole party of it type of thing and the whole circuit of it. But it's like, okay, well, how do you then grow if you haven't got a base as such and a team who you really support? It's a really tough sell to do that. But I agree in the sense that rugby needs to embrace something like that. Is that the answer? I don't know, but I think it needs probably more explanation and bits and pieces like that.
So final one from me. We've talked about the career. We've mentioned what you're moving into now. What do you think is next for you? You've got 75% of your time media. What's the other 25%? Where are we really trying to build out that value?
I think trying to have people see Dan Biggar as not just Dan Biggar, the rugby player. So I've sort of co-founded a SBS, which you're in as well, Charlie, aren't you? Yeah. You're a member of it, and it's sort of like an online community sort of thing. So you got all the like global voices from different sort of different communities, different ways of life, whether it's business, athletes, etc., and coming together. And it's basically think of it like a vertical LinkedIn in a sense. You know what I mean? It's just about connecting people up, and that's been really important for me, and I've really enjoyed that because what I go back to what I said not so long ago is that last 12 months of my career, that was invaluable because all of a sudden you're in a group with people and you're like, okay, well, does anybody know somebody, or can anyone help me find somebody in, I don't know, advertising or podcast or whatever it is, or America or Brazil or whatever it is. Why I've found it really interesting is that we're as a human race, we're not great at asking for help, are we? Do you know what I mean? It's almost like asking for help is a weakness, and I think for me that's what I found has been really good with the SBS. It's just been like, that's what it's there for. it's a community of people from different, whether you're an ex-athlete, whether you're a CEO, whether you work in finance, podcast, whatever you are. It's a great mix of people. Connectivity. And you can, all of a sudden then it may lead to 1 or 2 meetings, which then may lead to a deal or a job or whatever. So I've just found that really interesting. And it hit a bit of a, and that's why I got involved with it, because I've realized that the last 12 months of my career, I needed something like that. But also, I've probably been quite lucky in terms of how I've met a lot of people over the years, and I've managed to pick up some good work with, like we said, media, brand work, I'm doing some sort of leadership speaking as well. And the leadership speaking isn't me telling you this is the way to lead and anything you say is different is wrong. It's kind of passing on experiences of what I've learned from Sean Edwards, Warren Gatland, Lions, Wales, etc. But going back to the SBS, it's kind of like, that's kind of, it hit a bit of a chord with me in terms of, well, that's effectively what I've done for the last 12 months, coming out of a career where I've been lucky to meet a lot of people. Now, a lot of people may not have as many people who they've been able to call in some favors or any chance you can help me with this. And this is what the SBS gives you. So it's, I suppose the best way is like a vertical sort of LinkedIn community. And that's been really great. And I'm really looking forward to sort of like, I love the analysis side of the game. So like, that's something I'm really quite passionate about in terms of being as good in that space as possible. And just keeping it nice, having some nice brand work. And that's kind of like where I think my best skills are. And that's what I've said, like, what am I good at? And I think I'm quite good at interacting with people and being able to sort of, I'd say I'm a much better interacting in person than, some people are better on social media by all means. But that's something I've embraced a little bit as well. During my whole playing days, I didn't touch it, wouldn't touch it. But you realize again, through things like SBS, through things like speaking, through things like commercial stuff, it's part and parcel of the game these days. Whether you like it or not, that's where things are.
Look, we could talk about all of this for 3 hours plus, but I think it's been fantastic. And I so appreciate it. Talking honestly around the whole game, but also looking at you as well. It's a brilliant way to do it. And I love all the media stuff that you do, even if you did cause me a lot of angst while on the pitch. It's so nice that you're such a good guy. So at the end of it, hey,
when the camera's turned off, you could say something different.
Exactly. But seriously, thank you so much for joining us. I've absolutely loved it.
Thank you for having me, Joe. I've loved it. Really enjoyed it, mate.